Morning, everyone. I do hope that you are keeping well and that the whole remote learning thing is going okay. I've seen a lot of great feedback from you and your parents, and I'm so proud of the fact that as an entire community, we seem to have taken this move to a virtual school in our stride. I want to talk to you in today's assembly about some of the sillier aspects of this period of lockdown. I spoke to the staff in our training day last week about trying to embrace the silly. Trying to find something in the bleak despair that might make us smile and may even make us laugh. I made a perhaps rash promise to the staff that I would grow my beard until we were able to reopen the school for all the students. I thought that it might make sense then to reflect upon beards in today's assembly. I think that beards tell us an awful lot about how societies view themselves and what matters to them. At heart, as you all know by now, I'm a historian, and so I thought I would talk a little about beard history. I wonder how many of you have in the past studied the ancient Egyptians. I suspect quite a few. You'd probably be able to tell me what the ruler of Egypt was called. Yes, that's right, a pharaoh. You may even be able to name a few pharaohs. Go on, try. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Now, I reckon that the first name on people's lips was Tutankhamun. A few may have come up with Ramesses, and some may even have dredged up Ptolemy from the depths of their memory. However, I bet that not one of you mentioned Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut was the fifth pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. She was born in around 1507 BC. She was pretty successful as a ruler and is regarded as one of the better pharaohs. In the manner of the Egyptians at the time, she married her half-brother and ruled after his death for about 21 years. Pretty impressive. In many of the depictions we have of her, though, we see her wearing a fake beard. Why? What on earth was the point of a female pharaoh wearing a beard? I think it tells us a lot more about ancient Egypt than it does about Hatshepsut herself. There was no word in Egyptian for a woman who was a queen in her own right. Instead, Hatshepsut took the title pharaoh, which essentially means king. She was very much a woman in a man's world and did the job far more effectively than many male rulers of Egypt. However, there she was, good at her job, and yet depicted as a man in many of the statues of her. The beard was a symbol of power. It wasn't enough to be good at being pharaoh. She had to look like a man. This tells us that fundamentally ancient Egypt was a patriarchal society, and as such it was important that when one was doing a man's job, one looked like a man. Beards continued to be a sign of masculinity, and not just having a beard, but having a particular sort of beard mattered. I want you to imagine images of Greek philosophers that you may have seen. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and so on. They are always depicted as having long, straggly beards, almost as if they were so busy thinking about the meaning of life that they just didn't have time to shave. We learn from Homer's Iliad that touching someone's beard was a way to make a request of them. Achilles' mother, Thetis, touches Zeus's beard to ask him to help her son. In ancient Greece, beards mattered. Because long beards were cool in Greece, they were distinctly uncool in Rome. The Romans tended to view themselves as far more masculine and virile than the Greeks, and so shaving became important. The first barber came to Rome in around 299 BC, and soon, to be a man was to be clean shaven. The first day you shaved was a big deal. The day was celebrated as a festival. The hair cut off you was consecrated and offered to the gods. On that day, a young man took off the childhood toga and put on the toga virilis, the toga of manhood. The word virilis gives us the word virile. To be able to shave in ancient Rome was to be a man. My favourite Roman story regarding beards is that of the Emperor Augustus. When one of his generals, Quintilius Varus, was defeated by the Germans in AD 9 with the loss of over 15,000 men, Augustus tore his clothes, grew all his hair, and for years afterwards could be heard to moan, "Quintilli vari legiones rede." For those of you not doing Latin GCSE, he was saying, "Quintilius varus, give me back my legions." I love the fact that Augustus grew his beard and his hair as a sign of mourning. It was so out of the ordinary at that point to not shave regularly that by doing so he showed everybody that something awful had happened. Shaving and wearing the manly toga may both have been a sign that one was stoic, manly, and able to handle things in a truly Roman fashion. However, the Emperor Augustus's overt displays of emotion are so un-Roman that they show us a lot about that society. It shows that when you were at the top of it, as the emperor was, you could flout the rules and conventions and grow that beard. I suppose that is to an extent what I'm doing by growing my beard. I'm showing myself and anyone who sees me on my one walk a day from a socially acceptable 2 meters distant that things are now a little different. I certainly won't be tearing my clothes, but I may occasionally, how coronavirus, give us back our students. In the roughly 80 years before Abraham Lincoln became US president, not a single one of the 15 previous presidents wore a beard. After Lincoln, 9 of the next 11 did. In that Victorian era, beards were de rigueur. In the UK as well, prime ministers tended to have some pretty impressive facial hair during that era of empire building. Can we see beards as an early example of the modern trend for toxic masculinity? If you are going to conquer great swathes of the world, then you were, almost by definition, a tad aggressive, testosterone fueled and tough. Beards showed that the politicians of the day were the men, and let's not forget that they were all men, who could defend Britain's interests overseas and make Britain a world power. British royals, with the obvious exception of Queen Victoria, all had beards in that period. It took the horror of the First World War for that jingoistic, nationalistic tone to be lost from much of British political discourse. And what was lost at the same time? The beard, of course. The most facial hair you can find on a Prime Minister since 1902 is a well-sculpted moustache. Not a beard to be seen. Very little aggressive international posturing and no beards. Coincidence? Beards are back now, but they are thought to be different. Masculine posturing is pretty much on the wane, and that can only be a good thing. It doesn't come without a cost though. In 2014, the Daily Telegraph reported that due to the rise of beards, the male grooming industry in Europe was hit to the tune of £72 million. There was a poll done by YouGov, the polling company, that calculated that beards have become more popular amongst younger Britons. In the 5 years between 2011 and 2016, the percentage of men between 18 and 39 with a beard more than doubled. Now I'm going to hypothesise that this is down not to an increasingly patriarchal society, not down to toxic masculinity, not down to everyone entering a period of mourning. Instead, I think it's down to younger people rebelling. Young people, when they feel they lack agency and power, like to rebel. And I would posit that the trend for beards is a result of the fact that the 18 to 39 age bracket mostly can't afford to buy a house, often live at home for longer, and don't have as settled a career as their parents. What can you do to, in the words of Vote Leave, take back control? Grow a beard, of course. Now maybe I'm growing a beard of mourning for the fact that our physical school is closed. Maybe I'm growing a beard to take back control in the face of a pandemic that is taking control away from all of us. I don't advise any of you to grow a beard, or even to wear a false one. It's pretty itchy. However, I do urge you all to take control of your lives, and if possible to embrace just a little bit of silliness. It might make you smile, or it might make others smile, and right now that is much needed. Depending upon how long we are away from school, I might have a pretty impressive beard upon our return. What I promise you all is that when we are back, I'll hold a quick vote so that you can decide what sort of goatee beard, handlebar or walrus moustache I should have for the first week we're back at school. That should cheer everyone up. Now for something a little more serious. I was sent this prayer by our patron, Sister Jane Livesey of the Congregation of Jesus, who's currently on lockdown in Rome. It is about the pandemic, and I hope it should focus your minds just a little. Please bow your heads and pray. May we, who are merely inconvenienced, remember those whose lives are at stake. May we, who have no risk factors, remember those most vulnerable. May we, who have the luxury of working from home, remember those who must choose between preserving their health or earning their rent. May we, who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close, remember those who have no options. May we, who have to cancel our trips, remember those who have no safe place to go. May we, who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic market, remember those who have no margin at all. May we, who settle for a quarantine at home, remember those who have no home. As fear grips our country, let us choose love. During this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other, let us yet find ways to be the loving embrace of God to our neighbours. Amen. I hope everyone has a wonderful Easter holiday. Thank you.